Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Deep Work in the Era of Real-Time Communications. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available to you within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, Raul Castañon-Martinez, a senior analyst at 451 Research, and David Lavenda, VP Product Strategy at Harmony. Raul is a senior analyst at 451 Research, focusing on business communications and collaboration technologies such as enterprise messaging, voice, bots, speech recognition, and unified communications. Raul is widely quoted in the top-tier press, including publications like CIO, Computer World, Fortune, and Wired. David is a frequent contributor at Fast Company and is a founding member of the Reader Advisory Board at CMS Wire, where he writes a monthly column. David holds a master's degree in Science, Technology, and Society and is now pursuing a doctorate in Information Management, focusing his academic research on exploring the information overload experienced by mobile workers. David is also an international scholar for the Society for the History of Technology. Raul, please get us started.
Thank you, Susan. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the webcast and thank you for taking the time today. I'd like to start off with a quick overview of the topics we will be covering. We will start off with an overview of what we mean by deep work. What is it? Why is it important? We will also talk about information overload and talk a little bit about why it has become a problem for knowledge workers. We will place these two concepts within key trends that we believe are defining the future of work. I will close off the first part of the webinar with a summary and key takeaways, and I will then hand it over to David, who will share some insights in terms of how knowledge workers can address these challenges. Next. So let's start with a definition of deep work. Now, this is a term that was coined by Cal Newport. He is an associate professor of computer science at Georgetown University. He's also the author of several books, including Deep Work Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And he defines deep work as the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. It is a skill, which means can be learned, and it allows knowledge workers to master complicated tasks and produce better results in less time. Next. So to place this in context, we can consider on the opposite side of the spectrum what we can call shallow work. So shallow work refers to basic tasks that do not require a lot of concentration and skills and can be done in short periods of time. In contrast, deep work does require focus and concentration over extended period of time. Now, in the chart, we're looking at the two most valuable skills and assets which are that knowledge workers depend on, and these are time and skills. We're placing them at opposite sides of the spectrum. It is not as black and white as we are showing it on the graph, but it helps to place these concepts in context. Next slide. So from the previous slide, it should be, it follows that deep work and shallow tasks are somewhat opposite. And this should be evident when you think about the type of work that we do on a daily basis, and it will usually be a mix of deep work and basic tasks. So as an example, think about a front desk manager at a busy hotel and the work that a software engineer is doing. So the work of a front desk manager will require him to be actively engaged with guests, while a software engineer will have to concentrate on coding over long periods of time. It follows then that a software engineer, based on the type of work that he is doing, could not be very effective at his work if he is constantly distracted by notification, email, messaging, and so on. Now, the problem that we are seeing right now is that information overload is a growing problem for knowledge workers. It is not a new problem. It is something that has been building up over several years. However, we do believe that it is a problem that is growing more and more important and challenging for knowledge workers. And we can see it from in different ways. If you think about the trends in collaboration and productivity tools, we now have more tools that allow us to engage with our co-workers. Think about applications like Slack and Microsoft Teams, WebEx, and so on. Now, these tools are helpful for getting our work done, but as you can see from the examples from the manager and the software engineer, that they can also be impediments to deep work. Next. So what is actually happening in the workplace? So the problems of constant distractions are obvious to all of us, but we can look at some numbers. Now, last year, Harmony published the results of a study in which they looked at the work habits of knowledge workers. And at this point, I'd like to ask David to share some of the findings from this study.
Yeah, thanks, Raul.
David, so, before you share the findings, can we ask the people in the audience the same question? Great. Okay, so please answer the question that you see on your screen about how many applications do you have open right now, including ones in your browser, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, or 20 or more. And David can talk to us about the results.
Okay, so we'll wait, give people a chance to weigh in. All right, so there we see the results. So we see about half the people responded between 5 and 9 apps, and about over a third have between 10 and 14. So I think this seems pretty much in line with the results of a large-scale survey that we did of the industry last year, where about 3/4 of people had more than 5 apps open at once. So in interviewing somewhere in the upwards of about 900 respondents, we found that folks are working with an awful lot of apps at any one point of time. Of course, the challenge here, as Raul alluded to, is information overload, is that the information is fragmented across these different apps, and you constantly have to navigate from one to the other to complete business processes. We also found that people are using almost 10 apps to get work done on a daily basis, which is an incredible number if you think about it. And another interesting finding was that about half the people said that they go to their inbox 5 times or more an hour, proving or giving insights that the email, although we're working with lots of different apps and information is spread all over the place, the email inbox remains the anchor for where context is provided and where people get their focus for business processes.
Thank you, David. So I'd like to take a couple of these points to place the problem in context. So when we look at the productivity and collaboration apps, it is evident that knowledge workers every day have more tools to get their work done. However, it is somewhat ironic that they eventually become an impediment to getting deep work done. Now, to place this in context, I'd like to share with you the results from a report that we published last year where we looked at key trends shaping the future of work and bring your attention to 2 points from this report. So the first one is that employees increasingly rely on a flexible set of modalities, and by this we mean real-time communications in the form of chat, messaging, voice, and video to get their work done. Now, this not only refers to messaging applications like Slack and HipChat or WebEx, it also refers to real-time communications that are increasingly integrated into workflows and business applications. Now, all of this is designed to help us do our job and engage with clients, co-workers, partners, and so on. Next slide, please. Now, the second trend that I would like to share with you is what 451 Research calls the liquid enterprise. And we believe that the phenomena of real-time communications in the workplace and its increased and explosive use in business applications is actually the result of a larger trend, which is how we define the liquid enterprise. And this refers to how companies are shifting from a centralized mode of work that tends to be rigid and siloed to a more fluid execution, more adaptable form of work. Now, we believe that the growth of real-time communications in the workplace reflects this trend, and it actually enables what we call the liquid enterprise. Now, we also believe, however, that in the chart that you are seeing right now on the screen, we are somewhere in the middle. So some companies, and if you think about companies like Uber, Amazon, Lyft, these are companies that have become very effective in providing massively scalable and efficient digital platforms. However, most companies are still on their way in this digital transformation. So we are somewhere in between centralized work and the liquid enterprise. Next slide, please. So the real-time communications are part of the tools that will make possible the liquid enterprise. There are some dangers in this in-between stage. So I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that all those tools that we've been talking about and the capabilities that real-time communications enable, they are what will allow us to be very responsive to customer requirements following the trends set by companies like Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, and so on. However, this responsiveness can be very misleading because it tends to reinforce misconceptions about productivity. Now, what do we mean by this? Think about your daily work. We tend to associate immediate responsiveness and active engagement. So, for example, an empty inbox or being able to quickly respond by email to a customer request, we tend to think about efficiency in those terms. It is misleading because it can actually produce the opposite results and be in detriment of actually being more productive. Next slide, please. Now, there is a hidden danger in this responsiveness and active engagement that we don't think about a lot, and that is what Cal Newport and other authors like Barbara Oakley refer to as attention fragmentation. So a lot of the recent research in neuropsychology points to the fact that when we engage in work, we tend to be in an on-off mode. In other words, when we were looking at the previous slide and we were looking at deep work versus shallow work, the way our brains work, we tend to be in an either or. In other words, there is a lot of misconceptions about um, multitasking. We are either completing a series of shallow tasks in a consecutive manner, or we are engaged over an extended period of time in deep work. Now, the hidden danger here that Cal Newport points out to is that the constant distractions prompted by shallow tasks lead to attention fragmentation, and this has a lasting effect. In other words, it will diminish our capacity to learn and execute over time. So, the more we allow ourselves to be distracted by shallow tasks, the less we are able to engage in deep work. And that is as I said, something that has already been proven with many of the most recent studies done in neuropsychology in terms of how we learn to learn and the way our brain operates when we are learning and executing tasks. Next slide. So to summarize, I'd like to share with you some of my conclusions in terms of how the nature of work is evolving. So first of all, real-time communications and access to applications are two key trends that are defining the future of work. They are tools that will allow us to be more efficient and productive, and they will enable what we call the liquid enterprise. However, we are in an in-between stage, and part of the symptoms that we see are growing pains that are defined by this information overload. Another symptom is attention fragmentation, and this can be a hidden danger that we may not always be aware of. We believe that new approaches are needed to manage the flow of information. It will not be as simple as simply turning off the notifications from our smartphones, although that will definitely help. But there has to be more than that. We also believe that the evaluation of productivity and collaboration tools, until now, they have focused strongly on that responsiveness. We believe IT decision makers should also factor in attention fragmentation and the requirements that knowledge workers have to perform and execute deep work. So that's my part, and I'd like to switch over now to David. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. So some of the things that Raul mentioned, talking about fragmentation of tasks and the difficulty for knowledge workers to be able to focus for long periods of time. And this is really the starting point for looking at how do we find a solution to it. So we know that it's hard to focus on what's really important, and it's getting harder as we're getting interrupted with more and more information overload. Next slide. And one of the problems is, and we saw this with the poll question, is that we have too many apps. We're starting to get information from different sources. Each one of these apps has a different user experience. Information in each app, names of companies, names of projects and services may differ. It becomes very difficult cognitively to put the information together in a meaningful way so that you can focus. And one of these problems of trying to piece together disconnected information is what causes the information overload. Overload is not merely a problem of too much information, but the quality of if the quality of information is poor, meaning it doesn't connect well together, then a high degree of cognitive ability is needed to piece it together in a meaningful way. And this is clearly driving us in the environment where people are able to sign up with a credit card to whatever app they want to use. We see a huge proliferation of apps and the spreading of fragmentation of more information across more and more sources. Next slide. So Office 365 is a kind of a perception that this was intended, or one of the possible outcomes of using Office 365 would be to solve this problem. In the past, we had lots of different apps from whether it's from the Microsoft ecosystem or others. people now are using things like Dropbox and Slack and so on. And one of the value propositions of Office 365 is that if you use the tools within the tool set, it all should be integrated and it should be very streamlined. So if you use, for example, Teams instead of Slack, or OneDrive instead of Dropbox, you're going to have a very streamlined experience, and therefore everything will be easy for people to focus on so they can get deep work done. Next slide. But the reality is that this is what our user experience looks like. We've got upwards of over 20 apps in the Office 365 environment. And while each organization may not be using all of these apps, different people across the organization might be using different combinations. And even more of a problem is that there's a significant overlap between the capabilities that some of these products offer. So, for example, if you're working with documents, those might be in SharePoint. They might be stored as part of a team conversation. They might be stored in OneDrive. If you're having a conversation in terms of like a chat or some sort of an ongoing discussion, that might be in Teams, it might be in Yammer, it might be in Skype for Business. Even within the Office 365 environment, there's a wide variety of possibilities to interact. And therefore, when people want to focus on work, when they come to work and look for how they're working on a product or a project, there's an awful lot of effort needed to navigate and to toggle between all these apps looking for information. Often the outcome is that the ball gets dropped and you miss important stuff. Next slide.
So why don't we take a 1-minute break there and ask you in the audience, how many Office 365 apps does your organization use or plan to make available? 1 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18, 19 to 25, or you're not yet using Office 365? Just give that a minute, David.
You cue the music, Susan?
Yeah, no. But I will show you the results of the poll. How's that?
Okay, there we go. All right, so we've got about, again, 38% using between 7 and 12 of the Office 365 apps. So we got a significant amount of folks, we're looking at about 70% plan to use between 7 and 25 of the apps. So the problem seems to be one that corroborates our other findings from a larger study, which is that a significant portion of the population using Office 365 is either using or planning to use a large variety of apps. So this is definitely a problem that the audience seems to be experiencing, and that seems to fit in well with what the broader market seems to say. So next slide. So the way to deal with this, and Raul highlighted some of the key problems, is really we believe that there's two key elements that can reduce information overload without having to install different additional infrastructure. So you've invested heavily in Office 365. You want to get the most value out of it and make your people productive with it. We believe that there's a way of doing it by focusing on two main elements. One is allowing people to work from where they spend their work time. Today, that's mostly Outlook, but it doesn't have to be. Tomorrow, it might be a Teams window. So allowing people to focus, stay in the window that's most familiar to them and get their work done. And secondly, helping organize that information. So you have information coming from documents and emails and invitations to meetings and app notifications, bringing all that information together, but organizing it by topics instead of having to go look for it in apps. So regardless of where the source of the information is, let me focus on those topics and then be able to see all the relevant information. So this sounds like a really great idea. Let's see what this looks like in practice. So make me presenter. Okay. So what we're looking at here is what everybody's familiar with. It's our my Outlook screen, except on the right side of the screen, what you see is a sidebar that presents my 5 top topics. And this is Harmony 10. This is our new offering which is currently in early access. It's not yet available to the broader market, but this is the concept that we're discussing, where again, we're working within our email window. So you see all your emails on the left side, and on the right side of the screen, what we've done is we've working together with Microsoft using the smarts of the Microsoft Graph and understanding how artifacts like documents, emails, invitations, and app notifications connect with who is creating content, who is sharing content with each other. We're able to create a personalized profile of your 5 top topics. So in this case, the example here that I'm showing is this is a tour operating company. So I come in, I'm a tour manager, and in the morning I see my 5 top topics are the ones you see here on the right side of the screen, related to, as you see, things like a Paris tour that's coming up in the summer, a U.S. Southwest tour later in the year. I've got some work that has to be done with the landmarks, the registrations that we need to do to sign up for those tours, some staffing issues, and then how we're going to get people from place to place. So an analysis of my documents, who I'm sharing with, who I'm working with, the emails that I'm working on, the emails that I've received, and so on, allow Harmony to create a view of the things that are most important for me to look at right now. So let's take a look at the Paris tour. So I click on the Paris tour, I drill down on it, and now what I can see are related topics, because this is exactly the way we think. We think in terms of, for example, I'm working now on the Paris tour. The immediate thing that comes to mind is, well, I got some contracts that are work that need to be dealt with. I have staffing issues, registrations, logistics that need to be dealt with. All of these things are exactly the way I think about it. I think about the tour because that's a top business activity of mine at the moment. So this view of being able to navigate across these topics is really, really key. So I'm going to continue navigating and saying, okay, so I want to look at the European logistics. I can see, oh, there's a whole bunch of things that need to be taken care of, catering and photos, contracts, and so on. I'm going to go right to contracts because I know that there's a bunch of contract work that I need to be working on, and I can continue navigating across these topics. But at this point, I want to focus on the contracts because this is something that's really top of mind that I need to deal with. I can see here that I've got 3 emails, 7 documents, and 1 event that are related to contracts. So I can filter, I can take a look, for example, at the emails. So I see there's a couple of emails I received, and one about a contractor agreement, something about market research. And I can click on these and launch them in the native app. But let's take a look at some of the other stuff we've got here. So I've got a meeting coming up. This is coming from my calendar. And I've got documents related to contracts. So I see things, there's a service, catering service engagement, and some other things. And you can see these are coming from SharePoint. And in some cases, these might be coming from OneDrive or from Teams, not in this particular case. So you can see that I've got artifacts from SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Calendar, app notifications, all organized by topic. So I don't need to go to all the different locations to find this information. I can literally just look at it here in the Harmony 10 window. And of course, it's not enough just to be able to view artifacts. What I want to do is be able to do some work. So let's click on this catering service engagement. And what we'll see is that Harmony 10 will launch that document in the native app, which in this case is Word Online. I can make the changes to this particular document, save it, and then check it back in and go back right to where I was without losing context. So I'm still focused on contracts, but I'm able now to drill down on it and work on it without having to toggle. And again, go back to the reason that we do this is because by reducing this fragmentation and the need to toggle between different apps, we can remain in focus and achieve deep work instead of having to struggle to stay on top of things in focus. But one of the really clever things here is I can also click on the icon, and what this does, it launches the traditional capabilities of Harmony in the Locations tab, where I can now see the SharePoint and actually the document view of SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams all in a single window. So now I can see all this information. I got to the catering service document in SharePoint. And one of the things I want to do is I want to be able to share that with a colleague. So I can open up an email, and I'm right here with this catering service engagement. And what I want to do is I want to send that to a colleague. So I'm going to send this right here. I'm going to send this to Sam. I'll say here there's a catering document for you, and I can literally just click on it and send him a link to that without having, again, to lose context. I'm still in the same window with all the SharePoint. I can see everything that I want to do. I can also very easily find information in this window because we've used the topics that we saw in the other tab as metadata. So now, for example, if I want to be able to find specific information, I could literally filter. I can filter on by name. I can filter and just look at for specific contracts, maybe legal documents, and I can see those documents directly in here by filtered out. So this is really convenient to be able to find information. Of course, I can also do other things like drag emails directly into SharePoint right from the same window. So, for example, I can just drag this email in. It now becomes part of the SharePoint implementation, and if it was set up to do so, we could automatically apply metadata so that this would also automatically be topics associated with it. One of the other things you can do with emails is if I just select this email, I can click up here and on recommended. So what Harmony is able to do is it's able to use these topics and understanding the email by looking at the content and the header information. It is able to recommend to me where this would likely be stored within SharePoint, making some very intelligent guesses and recommendations so that this information gets associated with the right place and associated with the right metadata so that it can be found later on. So it's really well integrated with the Outlook experience, and now we've integrated the ability to automatically detect topics and associate topics with artifacts so that you can share them and work with them effortlessly. I can also, of course, look at the view properties. And one of the things you'll see is that they have the topics are properties. So, for example, if I want to now say, I see one of the topics that we've automatically assigned to this email is European landmarks. If I click on that, what happens is I am sent back to the topic view of the information, and now I can focus on that particular topic. So the ability to effortlessly go back and forth between topics and artifacts, drill down and find information, drill down and work on emails, work on documents, share information, classify information, all within the scope of remaining in the context of the topics that I'm working on. This is really the key to solving the problem of fragmented work, too many apps, and also, of course, the end goal is to be able to focus on deep work, which is what provides value to our businesses. So that concludes the demo. Let's switch back to the slides. The next slide, please. Okay, so just maybe one case where this type of operation makes a lot of sense is, for example, when we're managing cases with SharePoint. So cases, for example, for organizations like professional service organizations, health companies, insurance companies, state and local governments, where a large staff of people provide services to clients, to constituents, to suppliers, to contractors. There's a lot of information going back and forth, whether it's information stored in emails or documents or meetings that are set up to work with these people. Because it's spread across a lot of different people, the emails often get stored in Outlook, the documents get stored in SharePoint, and it's very difficult to have a big picture view of all the work. So case management is a great case where we see people have a need to work together with topics. So bringing all that under a single umbrella and allowing everybody who's part of that engagement to be able to share information and see the particular topics and artifacts that are relevant specifically to them is a real boon to that business use case. Next slide. So maybe just a word about, for those who are not familiar with Harmony. Harmony is, of course, a veteran company. Different versions of Harmony have been available for about 8 to 10 years now, and we have over 1,000 enterprise customers. A lot of the work that we've developed, particularly in the work that you see here on topics, has been developed in conjunction with Microsoft. We've have been and continue to be a close partner, having been selected as a Partner of the Year finalist last year and several years before. Several years running, we've won Office App Awards for a variety of innovative solutions that we've brought to the user experience for the Office 365 and SharePoint ecosystems. And most notably of late, we jointly presented the first Microsoft Graph-enabled app at the SharePoint NA conference about 2 weeks ago, where we jointly presented this together with Microsoft as a great way to use the capabilities that Microsoft is providing to developers to enable users to have a very simple and smooth user experience with Office 365 and to take advantage of all the great things that Microsoft has provided and is providing the marketplace. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, Harmony 10, the topics, what we've seen is in early access. Qualified organizations who are interested in participating are invited to join. We're looking for companies who are eager to take advantage of the capabilities of the product, as well as to provide us with feedback and input as to features and capabilities that we are currently working on to get the final product out into the marketplace. So we'll leave this slide up. There's a QR code. There'll also be the ability at the end of this session to click on a button, then you to be contacted to participate in this early access program. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
All right. So as David just said, if you're interested in trying Harmony 10 early access, you can just please answer the question on your screen. And while you're doing that, I am going to take some questions that have come in. So let's start with Raul. Someone asks, can you share some tips for knowledge workers to help them become better at deep work?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So one interesting thing about the use of technology and deep work is that what we have seen is the evolution of technologies for engagement have kind of taken over, while the technologies that might enable deep work are maybe taking a little bit longer to show up. Now, I can share some of the tips that the authors that I quoted share. There is something called the Pomodoro technique, and it's very simple. I can tell you from experience that it's also very effective, and it's basically disciplining yourself to engage with a cognitively demanding task, and you set a timer for 45 minutes, maybe an hour. That is probably what most of us can handle at the beginning. And what you do is close all the applications that are not related to this task. You also either turn off your cell phone or put it aside and just engage with that task for those 45 minutes. And what I can tell you is that it'll probably be very hard at first, but as you practice, it becomes easier. You just have to be consistent. So that could be one way, Susan.
Great, thank you. David, I think this next question is for you. I've been looking into our product, into our Harmony. The topic's one that is based on Microsoft Graph, Harmony 10. However, it's Outlook-based. What if our company wants to live and breathe in MS Teams? Would your product still work in that application instead of Outlook?
Yeah, great question. So currently, in what I'm showing here, we're focused a lot on extracting topics from Outlook the content of Outlook messages and the metadata, as well as metadata associated with documents and calendar invitations and app notifications. We are working currently on adding the capabilities of analyzing team conversations. We do right now incorporate team documents, but team conversations will be a feature that is coming in the future. So we are working on it. It is not currently available as part of the early access program.
Thank you, David. I think the next question also is a Harmony question. Where and how are the Harmony topics stored? Can the functionality be leveraged in other Office 365 apps? Are they personalized to the user, or are they managed at the enterprise level?
That's a great question, too. So actually, there's a whole bunch of questions here. What we've done is Harmony's created a topic graph, which is a graph that's built on top of the Microsoft graph. So the Microsoft graph connects people with artifacts and scores them based on sharing and affinity to how close people are to me. And we've built on top of this connecting the topics, so scoring the topics based on all the connections between people and the importance of how often I interact with a particular topic. Those topics are stored in a topic database, a graph database, which is stored locally on the Office 365 tenant of the client. So it is not available, does not ever leave the tenant site, and it is stored locally and secured according to all the Microsoft data security and governance features that are built into Azure and Office 365. Additionally, that information potentially could be used for other Office 365 apps. At this point, we are building this graph to be used for Harmony. The topics are absolutely personalized for every individual, although the question about managing them at the enterprise level is also something that is not currently available, but is on the roadmap. The ability to also not only manage, but have analytics of topics at the enterprise level is something which is we understand from customers is extremely exciting to be able to see where certain topics are trending, what type of people are the topics trending in, and departments, geographies, and so on.
Great. And the next question, are the Harmony topics multilingual?
So the answer is yes and no. So the way we derive topics, there's several methods. The most basic level, we typically start with a data dictionary, which is based on things like term store in a SharePoint implementation. It might be account names that we can take from perhaps a CRM system and build an initial set of topics as a baseline to bootstrap the process. On top of that, there is an NLP element which does an analysis of content and both derives and associates discovered topics with already defined topics or defines new topics. So at that point, the first part of that, it can be multilingual as we build the dictionary. Some of the components of the NLP and the machine learning are still language dependent. So out of the gate, again, for the early access, we currently support English. There are plans, of course, to extend that to additional languages, but not at this early stage. Will there additional languages be supported?
Okay. Is Harmony 10 strictly a SaaS solution, or can customers tweak or customize it?
So there's two components to Harmony 10. There's a service which is installed. It's actually an app that comes from the Microsoft Marketplace, which is a service which is installed on the client's tenant. That is a back-end service that runs, again, all the data is maintained and stored and secured on the tenant of the client. And then there's a client component which is installed that runs, as I showed here, either typically in an Outlook window. It also could run in a tab of a Microsoft Teams, or could even run as a standalone web app. So there are two components to get the full functionality. Our the classic Harmony product without the topics is a client-based product that does not have a server component.
Thank you. Will Harmony 10 support non-Office 365 apps as well?
So initially, where there's a big focus on solving the information overload problem in the Office 365 environment, there is some inclusion of taking topics from other apps. As I mentioned, so they'll be able to bring in apps from non-Microsoft apps. But generally speaking, at this point, the product is focused on the Office 365 environment.
Great. I think that if you have any questions here that we haven't answered, we'll follow up with you. I'd like to give you all 10 minutes before the hour. So Raul, David, thank you for that great presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. You'll receive an email with a link to view the webinar again within a couple of days, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thank you.